Look who's back. Did you at least bring me a coffee? What? No coffee? I bet you're just here for more stories, aren't you? Fine, be that way. I hope they scare the crap out of you. I feel so used. Our first story comes from an OP that has an experience at an Airbnb. It's called My Feet Were Grabbed in an Airbnb.
We stayed at an amazing Airbnb in New Mexico. It was very old and had been the original house on a big ranch. My husband was asleep, I was reading next to him, and our adult daughter was sleeping in another bedroom. I suddenly and very distinctly felt both my feet being grabbed and tickled. Thought it was my daughter and told her to stop. It did, but when I sat up and got out of bed, she was not there. She could not have left the room without me seeing her. It felt more playful than anything. Have others had this experience? The next night, I was sitting in the living room, and my husband and daughter were making dinner. The rooms are completely open to each other. I saw a very tall, dark shadow go across the space in between us and disappear through the wall. I am not going to share where this Airbnb is out of respect for the owner, but we are definitely staying there the next time we are in the area.
Well, sometimes ghosts just want to have fun. Next, we got one from someone that is having some pretty intense experiences. So intense, in fact, she needs to ask, does anyone know what this could be?
I recently moved in with my best friend and her family. I knew her house had some weird activity before, and I've always grown up around it, so it didn't bother me. Although lately it's been getting pretty bad, but I'm not sure. We've been seeing this thing outside, and it doesn't really do anything other than make noise. The worst thing it did was shake the camper and poke my best friend's ex-boyfriend in the back when he was laying down on the porch. Recently, we've been seeing odd things, like the first thing was a chunk of meat wrapped in newspaper was left on the porch while we were still out there. We were hanging out in the hunting blind, so we would have heard someone come up the steps or had seen them walk by through the holes in the tent. It's winter, the meat wasn't frozen, and it was clearly fresh, and it wasn't there when we walked by the first time. Then after that, we had a friend over, and we were in the hunting blind again. We heard footsteps. At first, my best friend had her hand out of one of the holes and something grabbed her hand. I brushed it off and reassured her it had to have been something else. At first I said it was a big bug, or she touched something else. We heard footsteps, but no one was out there with us. Later we all heard a man's voice. We all heard a different voice. I heard my best friend's dad. My best friend heard our friend who was silently staring at us, and he heard just some guy. I yelled out to Dad that we could hear him and insisted that he was gonna jump out any minute. It didn't happen. We sat in silence and stared at each other. Then we all heard a man's voice against whispering directly next to us. None of us were talking or even had our mouths open. We started freaking out at that point. We looked outside one of the tent holes to see the porch, and no one was there. The porch light turned on. We had to ask our guy friend to literally jump up and down just to get the light to turn on. It's really old, and I know over the years it's been harder and harder to turn it on. We packed up our stuff in the tent and immediately went back inside. About 2 days ago, we found these large, and I mean large footprints by me in my best friend's bedroom window. We share a room at the moment and don't have a curtain anymore. There was only one set directly in front of the window. They weren't there originally when we walked by to get to the hunting blind. They were long and thinner. They weren't like, I don't know, naked footprints. It was just shoe prints without actually any detail. We brushed it off and just went inside. Also, we just said we need to get a new curtain as soon as possible. Things have always been happening, but they've never been this consistent unless something really bad was about to happen. I will likely update this, and usually only it's little things would happen like hearing the cats when they're asleep next to us or something. Or just footsteps and knocks outside. Even tonight we heard 3 knocks on the window or something. Does anyone know what this could be? Multiple people have seen a creature around our house, including me. The best way I can describe it is it's pale with human skin, and it looks like it has large animal bones forced into human skin. I don't believe in skinwalkers, and I think it could be paranormal. We also see lights outside. It seems like it has the potential to be dangerous too, but I'm not sure. Another thing that happened was me and my roommate was messing with a Ouija board. I don't believe they actually work. I was just joking around, had it spell out something stupid, then tossed it off the bed to mimic a ghost throwing it. I never said goodbye. Later that night, I very clearly saw a little boy run into our aunt's room. I just ignored it and went outside to tell my best friend what happened. I've seen a little boy spirit before, but that was when I used to live with my parents, so I don't know if it's connected. Quick update. It could be getting bad because we make fun of it a lot. Then we get shocked when something happens directly afterward.
Look, when it comes to your friend having her hand grabbed in the hunting blind, just tell her to relax. I mean, it might not have been a ghost at all. It could have just been a bear or a mountain lion or something like that. Our next one comes from an OP that thinks she's talking to her husband, but she ain't. We call this one a ghost or something passing through.
This happened back in December of 2020. And truthfully, I don't know what it was. In December of 2020, my husband and I had a pipe burst in the basement of our nearly 100-year-old home. My husband was working on getting water out of the basement, and he had me stay upstairs as we only had one pair of waterproof boots, like fishing waders. And we had a very anxious dog. He had been down there for a while, and I knew he would eventually have to go to the hardware store. But while I was listening for him to leave, I was reading while cuddling our dog. After an hour or so, I hear my husband calling my name and the sound of wet boots on the hardwood floor. So it sounded something like this. OP? Yeah? Followed by about 3 to 5 seconds of silence. OP, where are you? I'm in the bedroom, right where you left me. I hear his footsteps coming down the hallway and then stop in front of our door. At this point, my very large dog got up and stood over me and growled in a way I'd never heard him do before. His fur was on end and he stared intently at the door. OP, where are you? Before I could respond, the doorknob started to twist and twist and twist. The doorknob kept turning but never opened. The dog is going absolutely crazy, growling, and now has himself between me and the door. Just as I thought the door was going to open, the dog barked and the door stopped. There was no noise of retreat or voices. All was quiet. After about a minute, I got a text. It was my husband texting me and asking me if I needed anything while he was out. When I checked his location, he was over 35 minutes away at the hardware store. I freaked the F out and pushed the dresser in front of the door. I had checked all of our exterior cameras, and no one came in or out other than my husband when he had left. I still don't know what it was. I've gotten mixed reviews of mimics or just a passing spirit. What do you think? And no, it's never happened again. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Wow, your dog went from being anxious to becoming Cujo in a heartbeat, didn't he? Well, that's about it, isn't it? But I know y'all want one more story, because, well, you always do. Well, what kind of ghost host would I be if I denied you? Last, but definitely not least, we have a story from a dude that tells how he went from being a skeptic to a believer almost overnight. It's called What Led Me to Believe in the Supernatural.
Before I get into this, I want to clarify this is all 100% true, and is what has turned me from a skeptic in the supernatural into a believer. I've never written down this story. I've only ever told it aloud, so I'll do my best to make this make sense. About 4 years ago, when I was 17, I stayed at my mom's house quite a bit alone, and I never had a problem with it. I liked my privacy. One night, I went out to my favorite pizza place, which was roughly a 40-minute drive round trip. Before leaving my house, everything felt perfectly normal, just like any other night, but that feeling was fleeting. When I returned, I immediately felt like I was being watched. I need to take a moment to depict the house layout. It was a 2-story house, but the bottom story was just an unused guest bedroom, the laundry room, the entrance to the garage, and old wooden stairs leading up to the living room. With that said, I can resume. As I was saying, this feeling of not being alone or feeling watched kept my eyes glued on the top of the stairs. The feeling was so bad that I swept the entire house upstairs, downstairs, garage, closets, everything, and I was alone. Looking back, this is when I should have just drove to my dad's, but I thought I was a big boy that could handle a little fear. I was sick of this feeling of dread, so I went to my room, which is just down the hall from the living room, to play video games. I kept my headset off and my hunting knife next to me, just in case anything happened. While I was playing, I swear I kept seeing flickers of shadows under my door, as the hallway light was on, but whenever I looked over there was nothing. This started to really freak me out, but I just kept acting like everything was fine. Eventually, I was sick of video games and got ready for bed. I turned my light off but kept the lights on everywhere else in the house just so that it looked like it was a busy house to any potential unwanted visitors. When I lay down, however, I noticed 2 dark spots under my door that looked like shoes. All I could do was lie there in horror with my hunting knife firmly grasped. I waited and waited and waited for those shadows to move, but they never did. Eventually, I summoned the courage to confront the shadowy being standing outside my door and then swung my door open. There was nothing. No one. No shadows. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. When I laid back down, however, the shadows were gone. I decided to leave my door open and turn on my light in my room. My time for sleeping could wait another night. So instead of sleeping, I watched YouTube videos mindlessly on my phone when I heard what sounded like large footsteps slowly ascending up my creaky wooden stairs. I'll tell you, even writing this 4 years later, in a completely different house, I have turned the lights on in my room to finish writing this. Anyways, I was frozen in shock/horror that this wasn't all in my head. That someone or something was coming up my stairs while I was home alone. In a split second, I decided that the best course of action was to lock myself in the bathroom that was halfway down the hall. I bolted, didn't take any chances, didn't look to see what was there, and I called the police. It was the first time in my life calling 911. I was trembling in the bathroom trying to whisper because, keep in mind, I still believe this to be a person in my house. They sent over a squad car while I remained on the line, and the operator told me that they didn't see any signs of forced entry, and that after a sweep of the entire house, that no one was there. This helped relieve me, and that was the last incident of the night, but not where the story ends. The next day, after telling my mom what happened, she was obviously horrified, but we decided to do some digging ourselves. We swept the house again, but this time found something I missed, and the police missed. I learned a fun fact about my room that next day. The only entrance to the attic was in my closet, and the lid was open. We couldn't believe it. The attic hatch was cracked ajar. My mom swore that she didn't even know it was there, and I sure as hell didn't know, and neither of us could reach up to it and move the lid. I told her that day that I would never stay at her house for the night alone, and I stuck to my word. I never did again in that house. After all that, after moving out, the story still wasn't over. My mom's curiosity was stronger than mine, because she talked to the previous owner of the home to try and find out more about the history of owners of the home. God's honest truth, she texted me this. Just spoke with the previous owner. Her parents built the house and her dad passed away in your room. When I received that text, a shiver went down my spine. A ringing was in my ears. This entire time, I kept telling myself logical reasons for what happened that night, but I couldn't anymore. The last update to this story came just a few weeks ago when I was visiting my girlfriend's family for Christmas when I found myself retelling this story to my girlfriend's brother's wife's mom, and she describes herself as a medium. While I was retelling the story, right when I got to the part of the footsteps coming up the stairs, she said to me, "Those were heavy steps, weren't they?" He was a big boy, and I just stared at her with shock. She also kept saying that there was a big boom or noise, and I kept racking my brain for that, and I couldn't recall it at all. But then I remembered. The night of my encounter, I forgot to mention that I did end up falling asleep in the 3 to 4 a.m. range, with all the lights on and my door wide open. But when I woke up in the morning, my door was closed. I hope y'all enjoyed my story. Definitely not the creepiest thing to happen, but man, it has shaken me for years. Hope everyone had a happy holidays.
Well, son, if there was ever a good reason to become a believer, that would be it. That story even made me turn my lights on. Well, there you go. Even though you didn't bring me a coffee, I still delivered some pretty scary stories, didn't I? That's just the kind of ghost host I am. But, do you know what you can do to make up for the whole coffee thing? You could always hit like, subscribe, and share this video. It'll really help us keep the ghosts at bay. And of course, if any of you have a story to share, or have any thoughts about our stories tonight, or if you have any suggestions on subjects for upcoming videos, or even just general thoughts about my channel, then by all means, drop me a line in the comments. But I do want to thank you for stopping by, and I hope the stories we told won't be giving you too many bad dreams. But if they do, then maybe you shouldn't run from them. After all, Sometimes it's better to embrace your nightmares.